Hello, hello. Thank you for listening. I hope you're having a good week so far. I'm going to talk about something that could apply to a lot of different situations. And I'm going to use examples for the topic of public speaking because that's something that I'm talking about a lot at the moment. But any of the things that I'm going to share could apply to anything and to anyone really, because we all have fears. That is part of what makes us human. I remember going to a talk once, and the woman, it was Susan David, who is a psychologist, and she said, the only people that don't experience fear is dead people. And I often add to that also psychopaths. Apparently, psychopaths don't experience a lot of fear. They don't have a lot of, I don't know if it's that they have very small amygdalas or there's just not a lot of activity going on in the amygdala, but the amygdala is really dialed down in psychopaths. They don't experience fear. But for the rest of us, we are going to experience fear. So I wanted to talk a bit about how I reframe fear. And yeah, using the example of public speaking, but again, it could be a fear of flying, fear of driving. That's a really common one that I hear. Social situations, relationships, like commitment or intimacy or setting boundaries, anything like that. So even if you're not someone that does public speaking or is afraid of it, then you'll still get a lot from this episode. Before I get into it, I just want to mention a couple of free resources I have for you on the topic of public speaking. So, one is a free checklist for anxiety-free public speaking. You can get that at karma-u.com/speaking. I'll pop the link in the show notes for those listening on the podcast. And I also have a free workshop. You can either watch the recording or join me live. I'm going to be running this regularly. And the workshop is all about how to feel more confident public speaking. I'm sharing my 3 secrets, things that have helped me, things that have helped hundreds of my clients. And you can get the workshop at karma-u.com/PS for public speaking. So let's get into this topic. The first thing that I want to say about fear is just how human it is. It's so easy to make ourselves wrong for feeling fear, as though, as though it's not the most common human experience that we can have. We make ourselves wrong for it, we shame ourselves. I would go into cycles of beating myself up. How come everyone else can do this? What's wrong with me? I should be able to do this without feeling nervous or scared. All of that self-talk that can be so unhelpful that we layer on. So don't make yourself wrong for how you're feeling. It is just so human to experience fear. And one thing that I really wanted to mention was just how disconnected we are from how we evolved. If you think about your poor little human body that evolved running around all day, doing tons of exercise, getting loads of sunlight, living in communities, not living disconnected from friends and family, not staring at a screen for 8+ hours a day. So much of our lives is very, very different to how our bodies and our nervous systems evolved. So it's no wonder we experience anxiety and fear and, things like flying and driving, although it is totally possible to feel really comfortable doing those things, there's still, I think, a part of us that knows that we haven't evolved flying. We haven't evolved driving, steel vehicles around at 80 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. So there's a lot of things that our nervous systems and our bodies have to cope with that we didn't evolve to cope with. So cut yourself some slack. Be a bit kind to yourself about what it is that you're feeling. I remember reading about this years ago, and I think I put this in my book, The Confidence Solution, about how when we are faced with a lot of eyes looking at us, like when we're getting up to give a presentation, for example, when we're faced with that, that triggers the fight or flight response. And in terms of our evolution, if we were ever faced with a lot of eyes looking at us, that was a sign that maybe we were about to get killed or about to get eaten or something like that, about to be outnumbered by another tribe or something of that nature. So the whole thing about speaking in front of a group, again, that's something that even from an evolutionary level, there can be something a little bit frightening about that. So again, it's very, very human if you feel afraid or if you feel nervous about that. And know that when it comes to a fear of public speaking, I read 2 days ago a study that found that about 78% of us feel a sense of fear or nervousness about speaking in public. So you are absolutely not alone. The next idea that I wanted to share about this is to help you to sort of overcome this fear or move past this fear, is to really look to connect to the deeper meaning behind this. Maybe that means connecting to the growth and the learning that you're experiencing through this. Maybe that's about connecting to what's important to you about that. So I'll give you some examples. Say you're overcoming a fear of driving, and the deeper meaning for you is really wanting to have your freedom, wanting to have your independence, wanting your kids to see you driving without fear, without anxiety, so that you're not going to pass anything on to them. So if you can connect to that deeper meaning, the why behind why you want to overcome this fear, it gives us a lot of energy and strength and motivation to overcome that. And it kind of reminds me of, if anyone's read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about in this book how those that connected to a deeper meaning were so much more resilient and able to cope with really horrendous life experiences. He's talking about things in the Holocaust, if they were able to connect to this deeper meaning and something bigger than themselves. So coming back to this example of public speaking, what's important to you about speaking up more, about using your voice, about having your ideas heard? Is it for you about making an impact with your ideas? Is it about helping other people? Is it about feeling part of the team more fully? Is it about, I don't know, maybe you have your own business and it's about sharing your message, sharing what's important to you, or growing your business and creating the sort of life that you'd love for yourself? So bring it back. What's important to you about that? Now, the next idea is about remembering that you are in the arena. Now, I went back and watched Brene Brown's talk about being in the arena recently, and she is actually quoting a speech by Theodore Roosevelt. And this speech is known as the Man in the Arena speech. And basically, it's talking about how when you are in the arena, you are going to get your ass kicked and you're brave just for being there, just for showing up. And I'm just going to quote from this speech from Theodore Roosevelt. He said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly." Now, Brene Brown said about this speech that it sums up everything that she knows about vulnerability. She said in this talk, it's not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about showing up and being seen. So remember, if you're overcoming a fear, if you're putting yourself out there somehow, if you are wanting to speak up more and be brave and use your voice, remember you are in the arena and you're brave just for being there. And it's about showing up and being seen. And Brene even goes as far to say this. She says, if you're not in the arena also getting your ass kicked, then I'm not interested in your feedback. So it's just that reminder that if other people aren't being brave, putting themselves out there, giving things a try, being scared, trying anyway, failing, learning and growing, then we shouldn't be listening to what they might have to say, their opinions. We shouldn't care about what they think. And I just thought this idea from Brene really sums up the vulnerability that it does take and the courage that it takes when we are feeling afraid and trying to move past that. And I really like to remember this idea whenever I am feeling vulnerable, whenever I've experienced some setbacks or a failure of some kind. I remember this sense of being in the arena and being brave and that blood, sweat and tears that it takes to do things in the world and show up and be seen. The next idea that I want to share is just about really having the self-compassion towards yourself to know that no matter how it goes, so no matter how, you try to get on a flight and find that you can't do it, or you go and drive on the motorway and you have a bit of a freak out, or you do a talk or a presentation and you forget your words or you stumble over your words, about how important it is to be kind to yourself no matter what. I think so much in our culture there's a sense of you should be kind to yourself when you're doing well, but if you mess up, you need to beat yourself up about it so that you don't do that again. And I really want to remind you that no matter how something goes, you're brave just for giving it a try. And everything is a stepping stone. Everything is a learning experience. And there isn't this idea of failure. We can often feel like we're in a place of failure when we're really in it. And yet that is just something that we can grow from. It is something that we can learn from. And I always remember this experience from years ago. You might have heard me tell this story before. I won't go into it too much, but the first talk that I did as a hypnotherapist, probably like 2013 or something like that. God, that's like 11 years ago. But I remember I had really put a lot of work into promoting this talk. I'd hired a space in East London. It was a yoga studio. I'd put flyers all around town, all around Hackney. I'd invited loads of people that I knew. And when the day came around for me to do this talk, I was extremely nervous and only one person showed up. And also some of my sister's friends who I basically kind of got to come along as well. But one person showed up and I was absolutely devastated afterwards. I went into full on beating myself up, thinking that I was useless, telling myself I was never going to do that again. Who did I think I was to think I could do a workshop, blah, blah, blah. And my partner, who we're still together, it's Aidan. You may have heard me talk about him. He is just a very confident person. He used to work in sales. He doesn't struggle with these sorts of things at all. And I remember him saying to me, "Great, you've got something to work with now. You've got a starting point from which to build. You've learned something from this experience. What can you learn and how can you do things differently next time to make things better?" And that, once I'd just stewed in my self-pity for a little while, really did help me. I thought to myself, right, I'm just going to use this as a stepping stone. This is just the first step on my journey, and I'm going to learn and grow from here. And that really enabled me to be kinder to myself. So whenever things haven't gone to plan, which they very often do, I won't bore you with too many examples, but I feel like I'm constantly going through setbacks or experiencing little failures or things not going as I'd want them to go. I just come back to this idea of just being kind to myself, no matter how it went, and treating it as a learning experience. And then the final idea around fear that I wanted to share with you today is around exposure therapy. So exposure therapy is what is very often recommended for overcoming fears. Now, if you don't know what this is, it basically means exposing yourself to the thing that you're afraid of. So going and doing the talk, going and introducing yourself to some new people, going and driving on the motorway, going and petting the dog, whatever it might be that you're afraid of. And with enough repetition and in doing this enough, you eventually learn that it is safe, that you are not going to die, because it feels like you're going to die at the time. You learn that it's safe. Your nervous system calms down and you gather some data that actually you can handle these sorts of situations and maybe they turn out well or you handle it better than you thought and that sort of thing. Now, this absolutely works, and this is definitely something that I have suggested, people to do to help themselves. But a way that I like to do this, that I consider easier and maybe potentially less painful, because let's face it, no one really wants to do this. I found this so many times. I always give, we give this advice of like exposure therapy, but most people don't want to do this. No one wants to feel the fear and have to do it anyway. So what I do with my clients, what I've done myself, and what I do with people in my courses and my hypnotherapy sessions is that we use the unconscious mind and we use visualization as a way to do exposure therapy without having to leave the house. We can do it lying on the sofa, we can do it lying on our beds, and it basically involves visualizing doing the thing that you want to do, imagining, tuning into your senses, and playing a movie in your mind of that thing that you want to do. So yourself driving, meeting new people, speaking up in the meeting, whatever it is that you're afraid of, you visualize it, you play a movie in your mind of how you want it to go. And this gets your nervous system, your body, and your subconscious very used to a new way of being. It becomes familiar, it becomes natural, and it becomes expected that you are going to have a different experience when you're in that situation. So, those are the ideas that I wanted to share with you today. To summarize, we talked about knowing that you are human. Don't make yourself wrong for feeling fear. It's very, very human. We talked about connecting to the deeper meaning behind what you're experiencing, what's important to you about overcoming that, for example. We talked about being in the arena, knowing that you're brave, knowing that it's okay to feel vulnerable. And we talked about being kind to yourself no matter what, and then using your mind to do exposure therapy. Now, I'm wishing you so much luck with whatever you might be overcoming or experiencing right now. I'd love to hear what you gained from this episode, and I'd love to support you with your public speaking. And I've got a few ways that I can do that. So, popping those links in the show notes again, I've got this checklist that is just really practical things that you can do and try to feel more confident and comfortable when public speaking. Or you can check out this free workshop. All those details are in the show notes if you would like to check them out. And I'm really intending to be more consistent with this podcast. I know I've been quite patchy with it of late. It's a little bit of a juggle now that I'm a mum, but I'm really wanting to go back to having weekly episodes. So I'd love it if you could support the show by subscribing, following this podcast, sharing it with a friend who may need to hear this today. Thank you so much for all of your support. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Thanks so much. Bye.